In spite of the spectacular show put on by the series' fourth installment, the fifth volume, Scott Pilgrim vs. the Universe, doesn't live up to that same standard. I would rank it at the bottom of the series in terms of quality, below even the underdeveloped first book. Much of this has to do with how the book's focus purposefully ignores the Evil X narrative conceit that serves as the framing device for the volume structure. This was well done once, in the second volume, where Evil X Lucas Lee defeated himself in an Anticlimax. Anticlimax is useful when actually done at, well, the climax, but this volume uses both off-screen fights and focus shifts to ruin it at every turn. The volume's biggest problem is the underrepresentation of two interesting villains who have insight into Ramona's recent past. Let's take a look at the anticlimactic encounters with them individually. Like Todd, we get introduced to the villains in the opening of the novel, and Scott deals with them throughout. It becomes a running joke that the twins, Kyle and Ken Katayanagi, never get properly introduced, which is a shame considering that they know the most about Ramona as a person and aren't as foolishly arrogant as Gideon, so they're capable of insight into her character that hasn't been delved into before. In true video game fashion, they throw robots at Scott to fight him, and these robots are weaker than they are combined. I think that the robot fights are worth some examination, especially the first. The first fight with a robot doesn't occur off-panel completely, but it does happen in bits to the sides and corners and panels where other characters are the subjects. So, what's the purpose of this misdirection? Mostly to set up the two main sources of conflict in the novel. The first being the idea that Ramona doesn't know about Scott's affair with Knives. This is brought up clumsily in a conversation between Steven and Knives while Scott fights the first robot. The other source of conflict comes from Ramona's glow and her own hypocrisy, which is touched on by Kim and Ramona having a conversation on the balcony, also while the fight's going on. So in this first fight, we basically get the thesis of the novel, that defeating the 7 evil X's isn't as important as Scott and Ramona's ability to handle relationships, namely their own. The formula for the series is turned on its head in this volume, and while that is an important shift, it is clumsily executed, and what was lost in the focus shift is a disappointing omission. During the second robot fight, Knives reveals Scott's very brief and nearly inconsequential cheating to Ramona, which really causes her to re-examine herself. Ramona is, in fact, a serial cheater, and she prefers to run from conflict. In addition, her glow keeps her stuck in the deterministic mindset that she can't change. This information gets to her for quite some time after Knives drops that bomb. In the third fight, Kim gathers evidence of Ramona's head glowing, but this does nothing to put Ramona at ease. During the fight with the twins, we switch form, as the fight is what gets focused on this time. However, the more important plot element, Ramona's decision to leave, is done off-panel for some reason. We only get the tail end of her saying goodbye. So now I find myself asking, does the anticlimax help build the story, and would more focus on the twins help this story? I would have to say that it could have. Indulge me as I reimagine the story a little bit. So, reimagining time. Let's say that the Katayanagis are still robot experts, but are also a bit more willing to get their hands dirty. They sick the first, and this time the only, robot on Scott at Julie Power's first party. The fight goes on in the same style, and the same plot points are hit, but the twins are actually properly introduced this time. A run-in with Ramona would be needed, though perhaps there could also be an interaction in Steven and Knives' conversation. Perhaps one of the twins could taunt Steven with the fact that Julie is now interested in them in order to build up their villain cred. The second fight would then be Scott versus one of the twins, maybe one that is presented as more aggressive. We can say Kyle for this example. The second fight at Sneaky D's could go on in a similar fashion, perhaps even largely off-panel as Knives drops that truth bomb on Ramona in the bathroom. Scott and Kyle could start off their fight with Kyle taunting Scott in a crude and aggressive way about Ramona's past. Then the actual confrontation can be done off-panel, only to reveal that Scott has beaten Kyle, but not to the point where he explodes into coins. Kyle retreats, and the story goes on as normal. The third fight would then feature a calmer, more prophetic twin. Let's go with Ken in this case. Ken would hint before Scott and he fought that Ramona is going to leave Scott because that's just the way that she is. One of the twins does this already in the original story, but directed at Ramona. Once again, not much attention needs to be paid to the fight, and Ken will retreat before being defeated. In the last fight, both twins will fight Scott and receive a stat boost from fighting as a team. This would go about in a similar way, but I think more attention could be paid to Ramona's preparation for leaving. The fight sequence and Ramona's departure could be intercut simultaneously, revealing the ultimate futility of these Evil X fights. As I see it, Ramona's escape has been foreshadowed for long enough, so why not add in the heart-wrenching juxtaposition as the fight is going on? So, does anyone else have an idea or an opinion on how this somewhat disappointing volume could have been better? Am I just talking out of my ass? I've been thinking of making these long video essays a bit more emergent and interactive, so if anyone has a good objection or addition in the comments, I'll add an annotation in this blank area following the spoken audio.